Welcome back to Cinema Flicks Music Picks. I'm Davey, your host with the most, the beast with the least. The least we can do this evening is to tell you where I've been for the past few days. If you have me on Facebook, you'll already know, and feel free to add me if you don't. Links on the main page. But I decided, after really digging deep on the Mann from Laramie last week, that gave me the bug, not literally, I've been perfectly healthy, to finish the Anthony Mann, Stewart Western cycle for this month as well. I've seen them all before, of course, as I have most of these films, but I thought it'd be a good chance to watch them in order and see if I could draw themes and parallels, and then it would save you time by covering them all in one video rather than 4 separate videos that may get a bit repetitious, which has never stopped me before, frankly, but who cares. So the 4 films we're going to look at: Winchester 73, Bend of the River, The Naked Spur, No Nudity, and The Far Country, Canada. It's not that far really from where it's far from me. Anyway, so we've already done Man from Laramie, which is number 5. So as always, we start at the end. I did say that reasonably recently. You know, kind of mocked my way of doing things, and he'd have done it by accident. But anyway, we'll go back to the start. So we begin 1950. Jimmy Stewart asks if he can make Harvey. I suppose it'd be 49 when he asks the question. Says to the studio, "Can I make Harvey?" Which was a successful stage play. He'd already taken over the part on stage and fallen in love with it and wanted to play the role in a film. And Universal said, okay, but we want you to make us a surefire hit because we're not sure about this Harvey thing. So give us as close to a hit as we have, make a Western. You know, which in 1950 was akin to make a superhero movie for cha-ching. You know, you couldn't lose money on many Westerns. So Jimmy said, okay, but I want director approval and I want cast approval, which is why a lot of these have similar casts, and I want a percentage point on the profits, which turned out in his favour. He ended up making quite a lot more than he would have done if he'd just taken it as a one-off job. So for each of these movies, he ended up made out like a bandit, if you'll pardon the Western pun. So initially, it was given Winchester 73, which was in the hands of Fritz Lang, the great German expressionist director who'd been in Hollywood for about 15 years by this point. Would continue to make great movies for another 7 or 8 years, finishing with another Mabuse film back in Germany. But Fritz wanted to tell the story of the Winchester and how it would drive his star mad, and you know, the obsession, Treasure at Sierra Madre style, the obsession over the coveted object. Whereas Jimmy didn't like that notion too much, but he didn't know what he wanted. And it was when Anthony Mann was brought on board and told Jimmy his ideas for him that things started to become more exciting. But I'm not going to go into that just yet. I'm going to give you a very brief plot for each of these. I'm not going to spoil the endings, because I think if you haven't seen any of them, I think they are worth the investment. A Winchester 73 is the most coveted rifle in the West. There's only 1 in 1,000 make the grade, and there's a handful out there. President Ulysses S. Grant has one, and one is being used as a prize in a shootout competition for the Dodge City town run by a certain Wyatt Earp. Jimmy Stewart's in the competition, wins it, and has his Winchester stolen by the villainous Stephen McNally. Okay, so that's enough to set up normal Western conventions. So that's your A plot. That's roughly what's been going on here. Then we have Bend of the River. Jimmy is I didn't even have time to say excuse me, I just sneezed. Thanks for the excuse. Jimmy is the kind of tough guy who's been hired by a bunch of potential villagers to lead their wagon wonderment of wagons. I don't know what the plural of wagon is. Wagon train seems right. They are homespun people, so they ain't up to defending themselves if they hit trouble. They ain't up to tracking to find land, but they're going to be going up to the Twin Peaks territory, Portland way, up that neck of the woods. And Jimmy Stewart's the kind of homespun guy that's going to help them there, but maybe he has a murkier past. Okay, so that's your kind of A plot there. And maybe I should just go into this part just now. Who cares? They need to buy supplies to last them for the first winter while they build a new village, because they're going to be cut off by the ice and the snow. So they do so, but the supplies are going to be sent on after them because they're too much for one boat. About a month into when they're expecting the supplies, they ain't there yet. Jimmy is going to find out why, so he rides back down on his horse across treacherous terrain. There's a gun on the cover, so it probably tells you things have gone south a little bit. And then we come to an undoubted masterpiece in The Naked Spur. Most simple plot you could possibly imagine. Jimmy's a bounty hunter, Robert Ryan's his bounty. Job done. That's it. But again, these are all the A plots, so when you remember that, it's important. Break down A plot. Far country. Jimmy and Walter Brennan want to, again, homestead. They want to build something new up in Canada, raise cattle, that kind of thing, farm. There's a villainous judge who controls everything on the way up there. He's got the lockdown on the border and has paid off pretty much an entire town. So wherever you look, everybody's in his wallet. So Jimmy doesn't take too kindly to that. Again, he's got a gun on the front, so you can see where that's going. But these are all, as I said, the A plots. The genius of Anthony Mann is that, remember I said Fritz Lang's idea was, well, it should be the obsession over the Winchester that drives our gunslinger mad, and only a good woman can maybe bring him back. He said it in a German accent, but that kind of thing. It was Anthony Mann that said, no. The Winchester is what I want the audience to think the film is about. The film's actually going to be about Jimmy Stewart's obsession over not the Winchester, but Steve McNally. So he is hell-bent for leather to pursue and kill Steve McNally by any means necessary. He is psychotic in his pursuit. This isn't a question of when, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. There's going to be trouble with these two. Well, it takes Wyatt Earp himself, played by a rather too old Will Geer at the time, to play Wyatt Earp to stop them. So, things do come to pass, and that's really the beginning of the thesis of the Mann Western that I'm going into, especially with Jimmy Stewart, that he has a plot and he has story, and the two things are often separate, and then they as the film reaches a third act, that's when they start to come together. So they're often divergent, plot and story. So he uses the Trojan horse of a typical story. He stole my Winchester, I'm after him, to actually put in a much deeper, darker story underneath. Because, as I say, Jimmy Stewart would be after revenge anyway, because of events that we aren't privy to until the third act of the film. And once more, I'm not going to spoil any of the Trojan horse elements, if you will. So I'll tell you there's a Trojan horse, but I won't tell you who's in it or why they're there. This also has Rock Hudson as a Native American and Tony Curtis as a Union soldier for about 20 seconds. So it's one of those 10 minutes before the really big stars catch them here kind of movies. It's black and white, which is the only one of the films that is, and Dan Duryea also plays a complete psycho for a good 10-15 minutes. It gives the film a kick up the backside. It's a bit episodic, which is quite a novelty. The Winchester itself is kind of cursed. Whoever has it seems to come to a sticky end and have a bad time. So it takes one hell of a gunslinger to control the Winchester. If you're not up to it, you might have just put a target on your back. So we do follow the Winchester. So Fritz Lang's idea was kept there. The Winchester is the inciting incident. It's the proximate cause of a lot of the story. But in terms of the plot, it's not. That was always going to be a much deeper and darker story with Jimmy Stewart and his quest for vengeance against Stephen McNally that could take place in a whole nother place, a whole nother time. Does not need to be Dodge City, there doesn't need to be a Winchester involved. So that's the kind of genius, I think, of Anthony Mann, is that he tells these primal stories with all the bells and whistles of it's a Winchester, whoops here, and everything like that to kind of tart it up and give it that kind of Western sheen. But actually, there's a much darker story to underpin it. And that takes us to Bend of the River. And the A story here is, as I said, Jimmy Stewart as the wagon master. Wagon Master, that's a John Wayne movie, maybe that's the name of these guys. The Wagon Master, who doesn't take kindly to his new friends, the villagers, being betrayed and not sent their supplies, so he goes to investigate why. I can go into this bit because it's this isn't a major spoiler, it happens quite early in the film. The reason for it is that there's gold in them there hills, and what they have paid for up front to be sent on the next month is now worth a lot more, and the greedy people of the village are asking for a lot more to help our new villagers, the wagon people. The wagon people, it sounds like the worst sci-fi ever, doesn't it? But there's also, as features in a couple of these, an unknown known, where a third element is added to the plot to make it very unpredictable. In this, it's Arthur Kennedy, who we saw in Man from Laramie. Arthur Kennedy, at the very start of the film, is being hung by a lynch mob, and Jimmy shoots him down and lets him ride with them. Doesn't ask questions, doesn't ask why are you hanging this man, what's he done? He just rescues him. And you kind of wonder if they get past. Well, they don't seem to, because they need names from each other. So has Jimmy got a reason for not wanting to see a man hanged? Again, I'm not going to go into spoilers, but there's something quite dark about it. And Arthur Kennedy is very much flip-flop. You're never sure if he's going to stab Jimmy Stewart in the back, if he's going to sell the villagers out, or if he is indeed a good lawman, as it turns out. Yeah. But also the genius of Anthony Mann is you're never quite sure Jimmy's not going to stab him in the back either. It kind of sets out that dichotomy, which, yeah, that's a rather wonderful use of Jimmy Stewart. You're playing off what you've set up in Winchester to make him this unpredictable, on the face of a respectable guy that's been hired by these folk in the wagons to get them through rough terrain, but who actually has a really dark secret, which is kind of cool. And that takes us to the classic, The Naked Spur. So as I said, this is as simple as it gets in terms of plot. He's a bounty hunter, his bounty is Robert Ryan, and Jimmy's going to get him by any means necessary, chasing him across the country. However, the unknown known here is the friends he makes along the way. So we have Millard Mitchell, who's an old gold prospector, and Jimmy meets him and then discovers Robert Ryan just a few minutes later, and Jimmy says to him, I'll give you $20 if you lay down cover and fire and let me kind of creep up behind them, because unfortunately Robert Ryan's got the high ground at that point. in a Western, that means you win. The other unknown known is Ralph Meeker from Kiss Me Deadly, who's a disgraced Union soldier who they find along their way, and he also joins in the party to apprehend Robert Ryan, and they wouldn't have done so without him. It's not a spoiler to say they catch him. It happens literally in the first 15 minutes of the movie. But the genius of this film is it doesn't make it about the chase for Robert Ryan. It makes it about what happens when they've already caught him. So a bit like this, it goes Treasure of the Sierra Madre, where gold corrupted a whole town here. Well, this preys on men's fears, vanities, greed, and Robert Ryan is a master manipulator and tries to turn them against each other. He tries to convince Millard Mitchell's character that he's got the rights to a gold vein, a good plot of land that will be worth a fortune if you let him go. He tries to convince Ralph Meeker that I'm not too attached to that Janet Leigh. You can take her if you want. I can see her with a fine young soldier. That'd be better for her. And he also plants the seeds, not with Jimmy Stewart, because he knows Jimmy from way back when, so he knows he can't turn him. But he plants the seeds with Janet Leigh about, if you can distract him, if you can get him to believe that you'd go off with him, then maybe I can, when he's too busy thinking with this, then maybe I can work on his head. Sometimes literally he's not averse to playing some dirty tricks with Robert Ryan. The general idea is that we follow them as they're bringing Robert Ryan back to justice, across betrayals of each other, betrayals from others, and their own self-doubts. So even when they aren't being betrayed, they're convinced that they're about to be. So who fires first becomes a kind of idea here. It's the naked truth is still taboo. So people, that's a Bob Dylan quote for no particular reason, but the naked truth really is that these people will have no compunction about killing each other if they think they'll get what they need. They wouldn't like to do it particularly, but they wouldn't mind. So the naked Spur shows the naked truth of their characters. Millard Mitchell was quite happy if he can, as an old gold prospector, he convinces himself maybe Robert Ryan's telling the truth here. Ralph Meeker kind of convinces himself, well, I'm a really good looking guy, why wouldn't Janet Leigh fancy me? And don't fancy going back to civilization with these folks anyway, so maybe I could ride off with her. And Jimmy Stewart, well, for reasons that become apparent, he's been keeping something rather important from his two sidekicks that is going to destroy their friendship. And then there's still revelations to come in the final act after that, which is an Anthony Mann staple as we're seeing across these movies. We think we know what the story is, but then we find out it's all part of one bigger story. That these characters don't just exist for this 90 minutes, that actually what informs everything to do with these characters happened here, or here, or here. It's all here. This is where the main plot for the character point of view has happened. This is just it all coming to a head. It's like we're seeing the third act of what could have been a miniseries, But it works wonderfully because it's never done as a cheap twist or a reveal. It's always done as a kind of natural evolution of the characters to know more about each other, for revelation, or for a third party to think it's a good idea. It's about time you learn that, that kind of thing. There's so much to gush about with that film, but time is of the essence. And that takes us to the fourth film we haven't looked at in the cycle, which is The Far Country. This is probably the least of the four films, but that isn't to say it's not still a very solid film. So we have Ruth Roman, very highly billed, and we have John McIntyre as the wicked judge. And the known unknown here is Ruth Roman. She's very, looking at her there, she's almost a proto Joan Crawford and Johnny Guitar, isn't she? She's very much like Vienna. But Jimmy and Walter Brennan just want to make it into Canada, even if it means doing business with the devil, then they will do so. Jimmy, quite often, even when friends of his that he makes along the way, who are killed quite outright by this guy and his goons, Jimmy does say stuff to that effect, that better to make a deal with the devil than to wind up dead, you know. So in this regard, he's not the driven, psychotic bully that we've seen in these previous films. He is almost cowardly, to the point of being smart about it. I mean, he's just not prepared to die, you know, a hero's death for no real reason and live on as a legend. He'd be quite happy to just, you know, get on with things and be left alone, thank you very much. So there's no surprise to say that it's Jimmy Stewart, so he's going to come round to, or something's going to bring him round. But this is the film in which he's not driven, he's not particularly the instigator of anything. He's more a reactionary type. So things happen to him that force him to take action, whereas in other films he's out already. By the time the camera starts shooting, he's already out for revenge or out for whatever his goal is. Here he's kind of happy-go-lucky, cattle rustling scamp, you know. So it's a bit of an outlier in their collaborations, this, which would be kind of a bad way to go out. Not that it's a bad film, but just, you know, thematically it wouldn't quite reach the heights of the others, except for then they did, as we covered last week, The Man from Larabee, which has again Arthur Kennedy from Bend of the River, and don't need to go into this because we covered it, but it once again does that A plot B plot thing, the Trojan horse, where the A plot is Jimmy Stewart, you would think, is only in it for revenge against the son of the local land baron, because he killed his mules and stole all his goods and beat the shit out of him. But actually, before the cameras rolled, to tie in with the theme, Jimmy Stewart's already on a mission to come to Laramie and find out something rather grave, something rather dark, and it brings him to a place where he would have to take on the same people anyway, regardless of the coincidence that it happens to be them who give him trouble when he comes into town. Unbeknownst to him, it's the same people. So, you know, that's what kind of forms the Mann Stewart cycle for me, is this notion that the anti-hero, as he's become known, is not so much a hero at all, but almost just one bad afternoon away from being the villain. Robert Ryan says as much in The Naked Spur. He says, you've done the same things as I've done, I just happened to get caught this time. Jimmy Stewart doesn't argue back. In Man from Laramie, same thing. He's only hellbound for leather because of vengeance. He's not particularly in it for dignity and nobility reasons, you know. He's there just for murdering's sake. Winchester, same again. He's there. He's out for murder at the start of this film. There's nothing noble about what his quest is. I mean, it's whether or not you think eye for an eye is, you know, justified. But I think that's why it needs to be set in the West, this kind of film, rather than, you know, maybe the noir era or something. You know, it wouldn't have worked quite as well there. Though there certainly are noir elements. But yeah. In this, yeah, he's driven from the outset again, and this is goals different because it's just to get the people to where they need to be, but again, he's got such a checkered past, and the people must know something about that because they hire him to be the wagon leader. But we find even more out as the film goes on. And in the far country, again, it's the lesser of them, so it doesn't quite fit my thesis, but it still has Jimmy Stewart as a man who will eventually come around. You know, the man comes around, and the judge ain't going to have a very good day after that. So, but Jimmy could be the judge at different if things had gone differently. If he'd have been in that position, Jimmy could have been almost literally Arthur Kennedy's character in this. He could have been in town when they struck gold, and things might have went different. So, yeah, that's really my thesis on all these. And to touch on just one more thing, really, or two more things, the use of landscape, especially in far country, where it's in Alaska, and it was shot on location, and Naked Spur, which is in Durango, set in Durango, filmed there. So I think it was actually in the Colorado Rockies, the big apartment, but it was filmed in Durango, something like that. The character, the location becomes the character in and of itself. So in the far country, for example, innocence is depicted by greenery. So when a young naive character is on screen, we'll see maybe an evergreen shrub. But when it's the judge, everything is very icy, and it's not hard because it's Alaska, and there's no hint of fresh life at all. So it's visual storytelling from Anthony Mann that's quite ahead of its time. And also in all these films you get amazing shots. I mean, Anthony Mann knew how to just make different types of westerns visually. It wasn't just right out to Death Valley and, you know, film there like every other western. So you'll see vistas in this that money can't buy because they're all done in these wonderful natural locations that nobody else was utilising. Everybody was just being lazy and going, you know, an hour down the road from Hollywood or on a back lot. But, you know, Anthony was thinking bigger. And then the last element that I kind of touched on a few moments there is the almost noir element. Janet Leigh embodies it here, and certainly Ruth Roman does here, where these films all contain a woman who, in noir style, may be the salvation of the main character and maybe his downfall. You're never quite sure which. And that's a very noir idea. Even if they weren't thinking as such in 1950, 52, 50, you know, that would have been in the zeitgeist, if not, you know, properly termed yet, and because it came from France, didn't it? Obviously it's film noir, but literally was written about in French film journals. It filmed the Cahiers, coined the term. So on a not a subconscious level, but just because that was good writing at the time, that infiltrates the films. So, you know, there's that to look out for as well. So again, although we've done a deep dive on 4 today, kind of 5, because we've also went back to Laramie. I know it's taken nearly half an hour, but that's not bad for 5 films. And I think it's been an interesting way to look at the Mann cycle in one fell swoop, and to find these parallels, to find what makes them linked, and to see how Jimmy's persona is used, turned on its head. You know, I mean, I can't imagine how it must have seemed when somebody went to see The Naked Spur to see just how psychotic he is. At least in Winchester, when you find out his reasons for being so driven, you would, if not sympathise, then empathise. But when it comes to something like The Naked Spur, he's a liar, he's a cheat, he's a murderer. He is, exactly as Robert Ryan says, just same as me, but you've just never been caught. Now you've turned lawman just for the money. So, yeah, well, as we approach half an hour, I think that's given you enough to work with if you want to check out a couple of these films or review them with that kind of idea in mind, that Anthony Mann is working on 2 films at once, the plot and the story, and the two are often working like that, and then eventually clash. These films do not come out of, like a lot of westerns. They don't feel like they've just been written and the characters start on page one. It feels like there's a whole prequel movie you can make, for every single one of these characters. And it would be a worthwhile story, so they are well defined, but they're not full of tropes. That's what makes them exciting and interesting, and would go on to inspire the likes of Sam Peckinpah, Sergio Leone, Clint Eastwood, and define the modern western as we know it in terms of the deconstructionist era, with Robert Altman and whatnot. But again, 31 minutes pushing, so thanks very much for your attention, folks, and again, hope you check out a few of these if you haven't done so already, and if you have done, stick a wee comment in and say what you reckon. I'll be back either tomorrow or Sunday, depending on whether I decide to do another double bill, but until then, just do me a favour, stay very safe out there, huh? Goodbye, my dears. Love and mercy. Love and mercy.